You are listening to a Roamcast with Neil Kramer.
The spice must flow. The spice must flow.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
The next stop is Delancey Street, Essex Street.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
To roam, to wander, to go from place to place, as Merriam-Webster dictionary tells us, without purpose or direction. Which, to the uninitiated, seems rather a pointless exercise. Yet in exploring purposelessness, one approaches purpose. Sounds paradoxical, but I found that to be a very important exercise in my life. And it's a technique I often share with people I work with to suggest that they free up a day, go out into the world without an agenda, without schedule, with no clear purpose whatsoever. Just an inclination to explore and to see what transpires. And for that reason, the word roam seems rather appropriate. And I notice also that the secondary definition, to travel purposefully, unhindered through a wide area, oxymoron definition, two opposing definitions for the same thing, like quite. It was quite large, oh, it was quite large, meaning a little or a lot, something and nothing, meaning and meaningless. And also, with it being the 21st century, I noticed that the third definition of roam is to use a cellular phone outside one's local calling area. So these are really spoken word essays of a sort, an opportunity to say some of the things I would have said previously in written format on the page out loud with the voice spontaneously. So whilst I have some idea of roughly what I want to cover and essentially what I want to explore or achieve, how that eventually becomes articulated is beyond my knowing, something that I don't have any awareness of, and I find that quite interesting. Not only that, but to embed that spoken word into the movement of the environment, into public places, into outdoor spaces and train stations and cars, and moving through the environment, encountering seemingly random incoming vectors, new experiences and sights, and dogs barking and people asking questions and smiling and shouting and all the hubbub of normal human nature. So to put the word into that space gives it some sort of reality that is not present on the page. And whilst the page certainly has its own artistry, and those who enjoy language and sentence construction and choice of words and so on can appreciate that that is best done on the page, what we're really doing here is not being writers or readers. We're not enjoying literature as such. We're using language to express something, to explore wisdom and transcendence and metaphysics and philosophy and life, culture, people, growth, all those things. And it might therefore be interesting, having put out a large number of essays over the years, to do this differently. Checking in with shadow. Doing things in this way gives me an opportunity to address some of the more topical matters of the day, current affairs and so on, and particularly things I would like to go into in a little more detail, things that I'm not always able to explore deeply during a regular interview situation, for obvious reasons. And also, I can just talk about other things, subjects that might be a bit obscure or irreverent even, or certainly hold some sort of singular fascinating aspect. But for the moment, I have been reminded in recent times, largely because of events in December 2012, that shadow is something that is constantly demanding our attention, and usually deservingly so, in my view. And that is not necessarily the evils of the world or the negativities of the world that are just unpleasant, but the difficult to look at areas of the world, the demons of the world that we ourselves have created in some manner, that we can only resolve, own, integrate, whatever you want to call it, by addressing them and understanding them and rewiring them, essentially. Now, as many of you will know, there was this shooting, the Sandy Hook shooting that took place in December in 2012. Now, on the back of that, there were some shocking proposals put forth by the Obama administration, immediately jumping on that in the most grotesque and cheesy, tacky, horrid manner to exploit that situation for political purposes too quickly, far too quickly and too grossly. And in discussing these matters in an interview, which I'll come to in a minute, it became very obvious to me that some people were very uncomfortable with the idea that I could possibly be pro-gun and anti-government. Surprising, to put it mildly. And it made me realise that there was something odd going on, which was that a lot of people were still characterising various spiritual and philosophical and metaphysical thinkers as left-leaning, you might even say, hippie-ish. And that view is, I think, is odd. Very sort of 1960s view. Because frankly, anybody who's interested in the kind of work that I do, my version of it and other people's version of it, it's absolutely about self-reliance, self-determination and fierce independence. Not being part of society as such, not being part of government, not recognising that relationship at all. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't support your community and your friends and your family, and you uphold civil conduct, you observe common sense human laws. You don't go around like some kind of loony. You observe what is there in front of you. You take note of what is real, and you aim for better all the time. I am very much into self-reliance and very much into small government. I don't believe that the government has any responsibility to support its citizens in a habit-forming manner, which is what I see happening in America in the last 3 years that I've lived here. I think that's stupid. And whilst it's always obviously clear that any sensible government would help citizens who need help, and any community would help each other, that shouldn't be mandated to such a ridiculous level where millions of people depend on their day-to-day survival for that, and it becomes year after year after year way of being. That's crazy. This whole thing started from an interview that I did recently, right at the end of 2012, with my friend and colleague, Mr. Brooks Agnew, or to give him his proper title, Dr. Brooks Agnew. And I first met Brooks in the summer of 2011 at a conference at the E.1 Ranch up in Trout Lake in Washington State, which is essentially the sort of home of James Gilliland and his crew up there, who are interested in paranormal and phenomena things, but more than anything have created a venue for spiritual, metaphysical and philosophical discussion, and people gather there for all different kinds of reasons throughout the year. And it's a great place, great people doing some amazing work, all with different ideas. Don't agree with some of them, heartily agree with many other things those guys are doing. And it's just a great place. There are others like that, but up here where I live, that's one of the chief focal points for such things. And it's just over the Columbia River from the neighbouring state of Oregon, where I live. So Brooks and I had both been invited as speakers, and since that time I've seen him a couple of other times, and his wonderful companion Robin too, a lovely woman. And we've had some great discussions, found some real parallels in our thinking, which is odd, because if you look at the pair of us, we don't look like we should agree with each other. But there are some very good resonances, and I think we saw that in each other. And it's interesting to get very, very different perspectives on that. and see what we can learn about ourselves, each other, and what other people might feel about these issues. So, there was a good dynamic there. And so Brooks had me on his show recently, X Squared Radio, for the second time actually. And we talked about the preservation of the Second Amendment, the Constitution, and this deceitful image and corrupt philosophy of the current administration, of which the figurehead is Obama. And we had a great conversation for 3 hours, really in-depth, good stuff. And you can grab those MP3s at neilkramer.com, they're all linked up from there. And we both had some great feedback, and the listeners really seemed to appreciate our very forthright and sincere exposition of the main issues as we saw them. Definitely not the party line on gun control, not the message that Obama would like us to parrot, or the corporate media, not by a long chalk. So, as often happens, I received a ton of appreciative, supportive and positive emails. We did a great show. Lots of great juice on that one. Thank you. Wonderful. Excellent interview. Okay, let's move on. Move on to the next thing. But no. Why? Because for some people, the idea of Neil Kramer supporting the choice to bear arms and being anti-government did not sit well at all. The thing is, when you spend a lot of your time talking about consciousness and mysticism and spiritual growth and this ancient wisdom and whatnot, you can happily discuss these things with people until the cows come home. The nature of reality, how many dimensions there are, the mystical origins of world religions, the importance of emotional intelligence, the reality of the fourth density, all these amazing things, all kinds of fascinating stuff. People can agree, disagree, stroke the chin in puzzlement, frown, applaud, smile or whatever. No problem, no problem. And the vast majority of people, whether in accordance or not, will speak in an informed and respectful manner, whatever their views. But once again, on the issue of the Second Amendment, no, it was different. What a strange state of affairs. Doesn't often happen in my interactions, this kind of thing. So it was just a curious episode for me, just to think, wow, that's really got people riled up. And Americans might wisely say, well, listen, Kramer, you start talking about guns and abortion and race and things like that, and you're going to run into all kinds of problems. You go down south and start talking about Christianity and religion in any kind of challenging way, and you're going to get lynched, sonny boy. And in the corporate media mirage of society, I would agree with that and say, well, yeah, I can see that. But in the communities that I usually speak to, both face-to-face and, of course, electronically through the internet and through radio and podcasts and whatnot, you expect more than that. You expect a broader, deeper view than that. So that was the surprise that wasn't the case. They even, amid some of the people who have been following my work for a long time, they were shocked to see me slag off Obama and all the sort of goblins that follow him around. As I might say a few times in this little diatribe, it's not about politics, it's not about being a damned Republican or a damned Democrat. It's irrelevant, all that stuff, quite frankly. I am against Obama, but I was against Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, Peter Mandelson, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, Condi Rice, David Cameron, George Osborne, Theresa May, and all those other people, all those other government people. They move against sovereignty, they move against informed consent, and they do not display authentic, honourable will. So I reject them, I reject their words, because they are not founded in reality. And so it just seems odd to me that people could get so very belligerent about this issue of guns and modern Democratic Party politics in America today, as if that's somehow all removed from our usual philosophical discourse. It's not. It's part of it. In fact, one might say it's right at the heart of it, but because it lies in shadow, some people can't see it clearly. Some people imagine it to be something else. And this leads me to the lesson, for me at least, that I found in this little debacle, which is this. People are still popping the blue pill on a much larger scale than I had supposed.